humour.
And did you buy Valerian through BT or Netflix and Amazon?
I actually bought it, to my eternal shame, bought it on a price promotion I got from Papa John's Pizza. If you get some pizza, you get to buy something off Amazon Prime half price. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Just a reminder that if you're watching the video, you can also listen to us on SoundCloud and iTunes. And if you're just listening to us, you can also watch us on the site or on Facebook. So this week I'm joined by the usual suspects with Jamie, who doesn't have any donuts, I'm afraid to say, but we'll work on that later. And Ian, who doesn't have any food either, so we're just going to waste away, basically. Which is something I live in constant fear of, as I'm sure you can imagine. This week we're going to be talking about UK broadband, a German reshuffle, American paranoia, and Nordic rivalries. So to start off with, on the UK broadband side of things, we're just sort of patching together a few stories. Jamie just wrote one pretty recently, and there'll be one or two other recent ones. So Jamie, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about how ahead of the game Milton Keynes is on Fibre?
Yeah, so it's a partnership which has been basically Vodafone and City Fibre sort of coming together, and it's something that's been in the works for quite a while, because I think City Fibre have had a presence in Milton Keynes for quite a while. They've been putting the sort of the fibre framework in place,
okay,
for sort of like for it to be a gigabit city, and sort of Vodafone have come out today and they've said, as of the end of this year, everyone will be able to get, if they choose to, 1,000 megabit per second on their sort of their consumer broadband package.
Right.
So it's
it's end of this year.
End of this year, they say.
Okay.
So,
and this is quite often when we talk about fibre is one of those many abused terms within the telecoms world. Fibre should mean fibre all the way to the sort of point of consumption, but it often ends up being sort of fibre to the cabinet, and then the last bit's done with copper and all that sort of thing. Are they talking full 100% no holds barred fibre here?
So I had a chat with one of their PR guys, because that was a big concern of mine. It's like the up to metric when you're watching TV advertising. Full fibre and fibre to the home is a bit of an abused sort of term by the advertisers, and I think so I got on the phone to Vodafone, and they were very careful the way they worded their press release, and I'm just trying to find the actual wording now. So they will be using fibre optic cables for every stage of the connection, from the customer's home to the internet.
Right.
So this is fully fledged fibre all the way. Don't even think about copper. It's going to be super fast.
Yeah.
It sounds like a completely legit deal. I'm a bit sceptical when it comes to sort of broadband in the UK and
claims in general.
Well, just claims in general. I mean, is there anyone to be perfectly honest, marketers at telecommunications companies, there's no one I trust less than those bastards. To
completely exaggerate everything.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just, and to be honest, I don't even think it's exaggeration. I would go as far as to say directly misleading,
just lying
in some cases.
Yeah.
But this one seems really good. It's just genuinely legit.
It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, and and the other thing that they turned around to say, because there was another concern is, are they bothered if they haven't got the demand? So they've got this page up on their website, and usually the case is for these telcos to say, if 40% of the streets sign up, we'll trench it. And I was just like, well,
trench it, is that the phrase?
Well, I mean, it's
trench it right up.
Trenching is what they call it.
Okay, right.
So it could be a case of, well, no one signs up to it, so it's just a PR stunt for them.
Right.
And
then they can go, oh, no one
wanted it, so we didn't do it.
And they won't publicise the thing, and no one will know about it, but they can still claim to have done due diligence or something like that.
But Vodafone did actually say that there is the fibre spine already through Milton Keynes, and City Fibre are going to be doing what they call mini trenching every single street in Milton Keynes. So that's going to be starting in March.
Right.
It's going to take the majority of the year because Milton Keynes isn't a small village.
It's going to look like the first day on the Somme, isn't it?
Started out as one.
Well, yes, yeah. but so in theory, you can literally just go switch me on, and they'll send an engineer out and they'll plug you in, so you don't have to worry about digging up the street, laying the fibre.
Did Light Reading have a look at this story?
Yeah. I mean, we've been writing about City Fibre for a long time because they've been there as a kind of irritant to BT for quite a while.
Right.
Trying to play
they
that
quite
role.
often send those press releases going, this just goes to show how rubbish BT
Yeah,
is.
and I've met their strategy head quite a few times.
Okay.
Mark Collins comes to our events. I mean, they kind of started out as a, sort of developing gigabit cities, but really kind of for enterprise customers mainly and public sector customers. And they also wanted to serve the mobile operators in a backhaul sense, so providing high-speed connections to mobile towers, which is going to become very important with things like
Certainly
5G,
is.
which makes the kind of Vodafone tie-up interesting.
I've heard 5G is going to be quite big.
Possibly, yeah.
They're a bit boring, though,
and then
aren't
they've City Fibre.
Yeah, I mean, all they do is moan and.
Yeah, I mean they do the usual thing of having to go at BT.
They got the challenger PR strategy, isn't it? A bit like 3.
I think.
Yeah.
The FTTH stuff is quite new, but it does follow these trials they did in York a while ago with Sky and TalkTalk, where they basically done what they're now doing in Milton Keynes, but on a kind of smaller scale. It's about 20,000 homes, I think, to see if it was feasible, and that's supposed to have worked out well. And then they were in kind of talks with Vodafone a long time last year. I think they had an agreement to possibly do something, and then in November it was announced they'd do this plan to. I mean, potentially I think it's up to 1 million homes by 2021. They want to cover
a million homes, but then in 12 cities.
In 12 cities, and then they could extend that further to 5 million in total by 2025. So it is quite a big challenge to BT, basically, what they're talking about doing. And the nice thing about targeting Milton Keynes is that it's got really shit broadband at the moment.
Right.
It's apparently one of the worst places in the country.
God, despite this being this sort of model.
Yeah, so it's a combination of a new city with like a growing population and quite a strong economy
and crap
broadband. So I think the press release quoted sort of average broadband speeds of about 20 megabits per second against a national average of about 45. So people there are kind of not very happy with what they get at the moment.
Okay, so they should be.
Well, going on that basis, you could probably say that the next one's on the list. I think Coventry's usually pretty shit.
Right.
Whenever you do your
I guess look at cities where City Fibre has already got a presence, or it's already, as you say, built out this backbone which it's using to provide sort of business services, because it's got quite a lot of cities now that it calls its gigabit cities.
Right. I can see an ad campaign with "We Built This City" by Jefferson Starship as a theme tune. Maybe not. I guess you had to be there. But, okay.
It's too old for us.
A bit of Mozart,
too old
maybe.
for Jamie, anyway.
So the reason Milton Keynes broadband's been rubbish to date is presumably BT/Openreach's failings.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't know what the situation is with, because the two big infrastructure players in the UK are obviously BT, which is national, and Virgin, which is, it's fairly extensive, but it's not everywhere, is it? And there are some regions where it doesn't have services. I imagine maybe it doesn't cover Milton Keynes, and that's why BT's been a bit crap at doing anything there, because it's always competition spurs you to do something, isn't it? It's always when there's.
Well, that's what Virgin Media have been suffering a little bit with, isn't it? So every time that they decide to roll out their fibre network somewhere new, you just get this massive campaign and push from BT
and
to
Openreach suddenly get their act together.
Their G-Fast is suddenly all over the place, and then
they
pick up their game.
Probably having said before that it's just not cost effective. Suddenly they find the cash from somewhere. When
well, they've talked recently about doing more on the fibre front, BT, haven't they? But they've not made any commitment to it. That they've talked about wanting to have new sort of partnership agreements and co-investment approaches with some of the retail customers,
and more public money.
Customers, rather.
They
want
old Hasselhoff's
the
always on the punts for public wedge, isn't he? He's like,
public wedge, but I think the right kind of regulatory framework as well, isn't it? They don't want to build this stuff and then have to sort of provide it to people at wholesale rates that are set by the regulator.
Okay. Bless our Gav. He spent all his money on football, hasn't he? So he hasn't got anything left to spend on the network.
They've still got this G-Fast scheme, which is just jacking up the copper speeds.
Yeah.
But that's only going to provide about 300 megabits per second. theoretically, which sounds a lot, I guess, but compared to 1 gigabit, it's not. And in the future,
I mean, that's the one thing that that gets me at the moment, is that I get the need for fibre in the long run.
Yeah, but at the moment
we're so far away from it.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask about that. Like for us as consumers, I'm sure we've been over this before. Like streaming HD or something like that.
Yeah.
What does streaming HD require? It's less than 100, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we watch 4K stuff at home.
Right. Oh, do we? I'm only just getting onto HD. We watched.
We're with it in the Morris household.
We streamed Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets or something like that.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad. The plot's no, it was fine. And that was in HD. The plot's pretty thin. There's a French film, Pierre, at Valerian. Have you seen it?
No.
No. Well, you should. It's French. It wasn't bad. The plot was pretty thin,
trying to
but
be
it's very.
Fifth Element.
But the broadband was good.
yeah,
It is.
basically.
It is trying to be Fifth Element, but successfully, because one of the things, a complete tangent here, bear with us listeners, being self-indulgent here, but one of the best things about Fifth Element was how sort of visually lavish it was, and it's the same guy, isn't it, Luc Besson, and they're trying the same thing, and they largely succeed, but Fifth Element's got more of a plot and more humour.
And did you buy Valerian through BT or Netflix and Amazon?
I actually bought it, to my eternal shame. Bought it on a price promotion I got from Papa John's Pizza. if you get some pizza, you get to buy something off Amazon Prime half price.
Brilliant.
So I went with that. And I don't normally even buy HD because, to be quite honest, the difference in SD and HD is largely lost on me. I don't know about 4K.
I can tell the difference between SD and HD on a big TV.
I can tell the difference. I'm
but
just not
4K,
sure how
not
bothered
so
I am.
much.
How good's your TV?
Is it like a TV that's that big?
No, it's about 30 odd inches, I guess.
No, but is
That's
it going to be is the TV actually going to be good enough so you actually notice anything different on 4K?
It'll be 1080p.
He's
not 4K. No, I'm just talking about HD.
He's watching HD, but he's only got an SD TV.
Right, yeah.
No, there's a huge
problem.
difference from SD to HD,
Is that
but
wrong?
not so much from HD to 4K.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, from your couch.
Yeah, I can't tell the difference with 4K.
From your
actually.
couch, yeah.
And I'm saying I'm not even that bothered about HD. Anyway.
I can tell the difference with HD.
In terms of
I can tell the difference, but I'm just not sure it changes my life very much.
It does if you're watching tennis.
Does it?
You can see all the fluff on the balls and everything. It's
Wow.
like being there.
The pores on the skin. Yeah.
Yes.
in terms of the speeds, I mean, I'm not particularly bothered by it. I mean, I just signed up to. So I was on one supplier, which was absolutely naff.
Go on.
For 12
Who?
months. Virgin Media. It was terrible. Got nowhere near the promised speeds.
Because they're supposed to be the fastest at the moment, aren't
yeah.
they? They're supposed to have 200 megabits per second offers. But
Absolute Mickey Mouse.
What were you getting on average?
Like, I signed up to their 200 megabits per second, and I don't think I got above 30, maybe 40 any notable time. The only time I did was when I was working from home, and it was nowhere near 200, and it was because there was probably no one else in the flat block. Admittedly, that's one factor to
But still, man, they're selling it to you. They're not selling it to your block of flats.
So I decided I just went 38 megabits per second.
Right.
That should suffice.
That's enough,
Yeah.
And it gets installed tomorrow.
Actually, it does remind me of one other story you wrote, I think, earlier this week about so what I was leading up to with this BT thing. It was a sort of bit of a deliberate segue. I do actually put some thought into this. What was the segue to? What was the BT thing? Oh yes, you've written a couple of stories concerning BT, Jamie, this week. One of which got quite a lot of traction, which kind of surprised us, was about Karelian, which is a sort of UK buildings and infrastructure company that's gone into liquidation. And you wrote a story saying that might be a bit dicey for OpenReach, didn't you?
Yeah. So, well, I think start with the other one.
Okay. Well, the
minimum speeds. Because if I'm just because complaining about never getting anywhere near the speeds.
Having said that, I think about my segues. I botched that segue. Is that what we're saying? Okay. So, segue take two. That brings me on to a story you wrote earlier on this week, Jamie, where you're talking about BT guaranteeing a certain minimum on its fibre. Why don't you tell us more about that?
So basically, they're launching two new products. They're ultra-fast broadband, and I think one is 134 megabits per second, and the other one's 154 megabits a second, or something like that. 130, whatever. It doesn't matter. Once you sign up, they will guarantee that you hit 100 megabits per second all the time. Of course, there's stipulations. Like, to be perfectly honest, it says like outages, like natural disasters and bad wiring. So there's not a lot of huge circumstances that you can actually claim the compensation. But it's a good. I like it.
Yeah, but as a minimum, it's such a contrast to up to. Yeah, now they're saying definitely 100 and then some.
They're saying, we can guarantee you will get. You're paying for this, but you will get this as a guarantee all the time.
And it gives you something to moan about if you don't get it. Then you can go, hold on a sec, look at this screenshot of my sort of speed test.
Yeah.
What have you got to say about that, Gavin?
But they didn't. I mean, the one thing that the BT press office weren't very forthcoming with was what constitutes going below the thresholds. How long do you have to be?
Right.
Is a spike for 3 seconds below the threshold? Does that count for compensation?
Right.
How long does the service have to be?
Because we had that
below?
Ofcom thing late last year about compensating for bits and bobs.
So you'll get a £20 BT reward card every time it goes below.
So you've got to spend it with BT.
I hate
it when they do that.
But they do say, like, I don't know what.
Is it an Amazon voucher?
No. But it's kind of like...
Is there any pizza involved?
But it's kind of like, you always tell me off for interrupting, and you do it all the time. It's ridiculous. It really drives me up the wall.
Okay, go on. Go into the 10th minute of your monologue, mate. Don't let me interrupt.
Well, you're the one who keeps firing the questions my direction. Basically, they say you can spend it with any MasterCard's retailer. So I'm assuming it's just like a credit card. But 4 times a year. That's you can only claim 4 times a year.
Okay, so you don't just have to spend it with BT.
Yeah, but the £80 is the maximum you can claim.
Okay,
and
then they can screw up all they want.
Oh yeah, but you're paying £54 a month. So you're paying how much is that a year?
What, 54 a month?
54, 50, so that's
about
about 700 quid.
You can show how bad we are at maths now.
Yeah, about 700 quid works.
700 quid, and in theory, if they botch it up 4 times, the maximum they will pay you back is 80 quid. Plus, they're getting you for BT
Fair
Sport
enough.
as well, which is how much a month? I don't know now.
Oh, but you can opt out of it because I'm a BT subscriber, and you can.
BT Sport's almost nothing though, isn't it? Really? I mean, you don't.
About £5 a month, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, that's
Not
all
really
adds up, mate.
charging anything
All
for
adds
their
up. That's a
TV.
pint a month in central London, or 10 pints a month if you live up north. No, I'm joking.
I think I'd rather have a pint than BT Sport.
There's your mortgage if you live north.
There was I trying to take the edge off my northism, and you doubled down. Okay, and the other thing, I mean, we were surprised it got so many reads just because it's a sort of technical story.
So
but
boring, isn't it?
It's boring, but I think it got reads because there's a current affairs story in the UK in general. A massive infrastructure player going tits up has all sorts of knock-on effects, and actually the bigger story. So we think their direct telecoms exposure is limited. Is that right?
Karelian, yeah, I think it's. I mean, how much are they in a hole? How much are they looking to pay back or something like that?
I mean, if they're having to go into liquidation, then they're just screwed.
Yeah, they're absolutely ruined. But their telecoms business, it doesn't look that big. Right. So much so that the main sort of like Karelian supplier is actually a joint venture. Right. So it's not even part of their own business, but they still have a pretty significant contract out with Openreach.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the other ones were. The Ministry of Defence out in Cyprus.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff.
And a couple of other ones.
Well,
as well.
It's infrastructure. I mean, it sort of takes me back about 10 years to the sort of too big to fail thing.
Yeah.
With the banks, you got certain companies.
It was 10 years ago.
Do you know what I mean? You got certain companies that are so sort of enmeshed with the broader economy that if they do go wrong, there's some kind of obligation to the public, to the government, to sort of bail them out because they're afraid the knock-on effects of them failing will be far worse than the cost of bailing them out. But the flip side of that is, people talk about privatising profit and nationalising risk, nationalising loss, and of course that's just rubbish, isn't it? You can't have a private company that's underwritten by the taxpayer, so that the people running it can just go mental and just take whatever risks they want in the knowledge there's not going to be any sort of downside for them.
Well, there was an interesting comment in the Evening Standard the other day where they were saying that the being a public sector supplier is so risky because there's so much that flies around for people overcharging departments. So
Yeah.
you have to do it as low and as low and
Yeah.
as low as possible. Therefore, you're taking all the profit margin out. So you've got companies like Karelian that are just operating on, their gas tank is running on fumes the entire time. So
And then if something goes wrong, you've had it.
If something big goes
buffer at
wrong.
all, yeah.
No, it's true. I've seen people adopt all kinds of entrenched ideological positions on PPPs, public-private partnerships. And of course, if you're more from a sort of lefty point of view, then it's just horrible capitalists trying to rip off the taxpayer. But you're right, it isn't quite as simple as that, and it's not the cash cow that some people make it out to be. So it's a bit more of a complicated story, I think.
But at the same time, like, private enterprise is generally better than public sector anyway,
Well, that's the other side of the debate.
Yeah.
You say that to a lefty and you're in for a long
Yeah,
evening.
no, but when was the last time a nationalised business actually did anything decent? There's a reason they privatised them.
There we go.
Because they couldn't run them profitably, so they couldn't do the investment.
And on that note, I'd like to announce
Some
our
of them
spin-off podcast, arguing the toss about politics with Jamie, Ian and Scott. Cool. All right, we should probably move on from all that. What did I say I was going to do next? We're going to talk about
Deutsche Telekom.
Ian's story. So there's been some reshuffling going at the top of Deutsche Telekom, yeah?
Yeah, it's a little scoopette by Light Reading, really. So it's
Okay,
just
nice
kind
one.
of shameless promotion by
That's quite all right.
Light Reading.
A scoopette counts as a scoop.
Bruno Jakob Feuerborn. Hard to pronounce, but
that's the only reason you bring this up. You like to show off that you can
I can
pronounce
speak
his
some
name.
German, yeah. So he's been the CTO of Deutsche Telekom for some time. He's always there at MWC, obviously showing off.
Did you know you can speak a bit of German because you said his name?
Yeah. Well, I can order a beer, maybe.
Go on, let's say
I
his
can
name.
go, so I can speep German as well.
Yeah, but you say his surname and we'll
Yeah,
compare the difference between
How many
and
syllables
what
are
you're
there in?
saying.
Yeah.
Schweinsteiger.
Oh, yeah. Don't often
No,
have
anyway-
French people do German impressions for you. Thanks for that.
So he's
Opening old wounds.
he's basically no longer the CTO as of kind of the end of last year. He's now he's sort of been moved sideways into this infrastructure business called Deutsche Funksturm, I think, which is
More German, Jamie.
which looks after the towers business, which is interesting because there's been speculation about a spin-off of that unit recently to raise capital for investment activities.
It's the old spin off the tower unit to raise
Spin
some
off
wage.
the tower unit.
It's a well-trodden path, isn't it?
Yeah, this is something that Herkes, the actual CEO of DT, mentioned at a Morgan Stanley conference, I think, that they could potentially spin that off to raise capital for investment activities, and there's been concern about how much they're going to have to spend on 5G rollout. So almost the same time that he said this, Jakob Feuerborn's gone into this sort of CEO role at that company, which is still within the DT group.
Right.
And this guy that came in from SK Telecom last year, he was sort of announced as a sort of VP and doesn't really have a job title at the moment. But this is Alex Choi. He was formerly CTO at SK Telecom. He now appears to be the acting CTO, basically, of Deutsche Telekom, even though he doesn't have that title. It seems like they're doing away with the CTO title, which might be to do with the fact that the most senior executive in DT who's in charge of technology is Claudia Nemat. She's board member for technology and innovation, I think is her actual job title. So it might have been to sort of reduce some confusion, I guess, about the chain of command. But Choi is basically the new Jakob Feuerborn.
And what are Choi's credentials?
Yeah, so he's been at SK Telecom, which is interesting because that is one of the telecom operators globally, I guess, it's regarded as something of a tech pioneer, and they've really kind of pushed ahead in things like 5G, AI.
Well, they've got the
virtualization
coming up next month, don't they?
Self-driving cars, all this sort of stuff.
Winter Olympics, where they're supposed to be demoing all these 5G
Is that just coming
things.
up?
it's next month,
That's
isn't it?
God, I haven't been paying attention to my Olympic
on your
calendar.
Eurosport subscription, you can see a countdown to the number of days when it
my bad
starts.
for not checking in.
And it's supposed to be the this is 5G becoming
Olympics.
is like the real world, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and everyone's just going to be doing 5G things with it, whatever they may be.
Or SK Telecom are going to be doing
SK
a lot
Telecom
of
and
5G.
Korea Telecom as well. I mean, the two operators are
Right.
both kind of regarded, I think, as real kind of innovators in that area. So Choi was leading a lot of that effort, and they had a relationship with DT. They were doing a lot of network slicing trials with DT last year. So it sounds like DT has sort of lured
They're quite
him
cosy.
lured him from.
So that might strain the
previous
relationship a
job.
little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So is the feeling that he was headhunted?
Well, I mean, they have this deal, and then all of a sudden he's joining DT.
Right. Could be.
I don't know what the circumstances are, but
my son's been saying, "Can I do like a German exchange?" Do you think it could be something like that?
Well, he's just
do they send a lad over to Korea for a bit?
But there's been a lot of that recently, because we were talking down in the office just before we came up here. Ulf has been shifted sideways in Ericsson, hasn't he? And did Ray mention another company that's shifted around their execs?
Almost certainly, but I can't remember who. But yeah, there's a bit of that going on. Maybe do you think the general trend is people positioning themselves more for 5G and
I think
their ducks in a row?
That's maybe the interesting thing about this is that you've got the former CTO now looking at this towers unit, which suggests there's something going to be done with that, potentially a spin-off. And then you've got the guy who's now come in and who's effectively the CTO, even though they're not calling him that, is a person who's got, who's acknowledged as one of the kind of leaders on 5G and artificial intelligence and a lot of these newfangled technologies that everybody's getting very excited about. So, DT at last year's Mobile World Congress was making a lot of noise about 5G and saying that they wanted to be quite aggressive on the rollout of it. And now we've seen it standardised in the last few weeks. The first radio standards be kind of locked down. It sort of shows where their priorities are, I guess, the moves that have happened, and suggests.
Yeah, they seem to be among the European operators the most sort of forward-looking when it comes to tech. Would you agree?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I've always been quite impressed by DT. They're quite sort of frank about what they're doing, and they're good to communicate with.
But didn't you say a couple of weeks ago that in terms of they are quite forward-looking and all that sort of thing, but their fibre rollout is like just miles behind everyone.
Yeah, they've not. Germany does. You could argue that Germany lags other parts of Europe on fibre, along with the UK. Actually, they're kind of quite similar.
Doesn't surprise me.
Quite similar in a lot of respects. They've done a similar thing to BT. They've rolled fibre out to cabinets, and they're using technologies like vectoring to kind of improve the speeds over the copper. But
so it could be just one of those sort of legacy state monopolists. They've got so much invested in the legacy infrastructure, they don't want to go too crazy.
Well, they've had the same arguments that
sweat their assets
that BT's come out with. They don't want to build fibre networks and then have to open those to on a wholesale basis that makes it hard for them to recoup the investments. And it's a massive country. It's not an easy country to roll out fibre networks in because it's big and it doesn't have, it's not like parts of Eastern Europe or the Far East where you have lots of multi-dwelling units and you can serve households quite economically. It's quite difficult in Germany to do a sort of widespread rollout of fibre. But there are signs of this changing. I mean, there's some momentum now in the fibre area, and there's even DT is now starting to up its investments in full fibre networks. There are companies like Vodafone as well doing interesting things over there. They had an announcement last year about extending fibre networks in partnership with a city fibre-like player.
Was that for their business parks?
It's partly in business parks. So that's where, largely in business parks.
So that's why I gave Vodafone a ring this morning, because the deal that they had there is that they'll only run fibre to the business parks if they get 40% of the businesses actually to sign up.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're tranching the entire place. They're literally like Vodafone is literally going, look, put a bit of cash in our pocket and we'll take it out to you.
It's just constant rolling negotiation, isn't it? You want infrastructure.
Yeah.
Help us out.
Yeah. Give us a guarantee.
Yeah.
Which is why I really like this Vodafone City Fibre thing. I think it's a really, really good one. But in Germany, they don't seem as adventurous, or they don't have a partner which
they don't see a commercial
fibre.
rationale for doing it at the moment. But it's starting to change, and technologies like 5G will put pressure on them to invest in more fibre anyway, just for the sort of backhaul that you need to support that. So there is some momentum happening, but I think less on the fixed line side, but certainly on the mobile side, DT's been quite aggressive, I think, and what it's saying about 5G, it's probably made more noise about that technology than most other European incumbents, which tend to be a bit quiet about it, I think, compared to the guys in North America and Asia that seem to talk about it all the time.
Do you know what? You've just given me my next segue. We'll talk about North America and 5G. We've got. I think we spoke about this a little bit last week, but it's still developing, which is the attitude of the US towards Chinese telecommunications companies. Now, it's long been known that the US state doesn't want sort of Huawei ZTE involved in infrastructure. And the reason they state is that they're worried about the relationship between those companies and the Chinese state, the Communist Party, whatever the guys in charge, and things like espionage.
Yeah.
I don't, and then the spooks in the States reckon they got evidence. The Chinese go, I don't know what you're talking about, and none of us have any inside knowledge on it.
Yeah.
But what I thought was an interesting further development was a story. I don't know to what extent it's been substantiated. I think it was anonymously sourced when I covered it. But they reckon now the US state is also putting pressure on private enterprise not to work with them at all. So we had the AT&T, the abortive sort of smartphone launch at CES, the AT&T Huawei thing. But it seems that more generally, and China Mobile seemed to get looped into this rumour as well, that basically they're going, all right, do business with them if you want, but don't expect to do any business with the US state. So they're sort of using their power as a big spender to pressure, to put to almost sort of menace these companies not working with them. And I'm just not sure. I think if there are espionage concerns, they're valid, but I start to feel uneasy when you get the state putting too much pressure on private enterprise.
Trump's behind all this.
I mean, I think it's perfectly valid to start with, because the Americans are probably doing it to everyone else.
So again, if I was them,
that's why they're so sure that the Chinese are spying on them, because the American government is spying on everyone else.
They probably keep bumping into each other, like halfway under the Pacific. But sorry, mate, as you were.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be that long before it is illegal for someone like AT&T or Verizon to work with an American company, because a Chinese company, sorry, because you have that.
This is this bill that's been put forward, isn't it? This legislation.
So you've got this guy called Mike Conaway, who's a congressman out of Texas, I think, and he's tabled a bill which essentially bans any government company or government employee from having or using equipment from ZTE and Huawei. So that's, everything from telecoms,
the national telcos, because they all,
telecom infrastructure, but also devices.
Yeah.
And if that passes, there's a long way before that'll go into law. But if that passes, there's no. The next step could be
the door's firmly shut then, isn't it, for Huawei and ZTE, really?
For governments, but then they could also say, we don't want to indirectly work with them, so we're not going to work with any telco that has contracts with ZTE. Or I think it could be, if this passes, it could just be step, and eventually all Chinese companies are banned from the US.
Yeah, which is, so it's slightly worrying just in a sort of general ratcheting up of aggro between the US and China, which are basically, with Russia in decline at the two world superpowers. So that's always a little bit worrying. We don't want to get these sort of nasty little Cold War flashbacks and all that sort of thing. But the other thing, on a much more sort of telecoms basis, is things like the 5G standardization process. So that was specifically flagged up in the story that I sort of re-reported. That they don't even like the fact that, for example, AT&T and Huawei might be collaborating on 5G standardization. Now, one of the groovy things about things like standardization is supposed to be that it's this global thing that transcends politics, transcends borders. It's just a bunch of telecoms boffins trying to work out the best way to solve telecoms problems.
Well, this is congressional aides, isn't it? That's supposedly said that they wouldn't want AT&T having anything to do with Huawei actually on 5G standardisation, so it's not just a case of not buying stuff from them.
Exactly.
When they get together for their shindig in Barcelona or whatever, they can't even go into a room and talk about 5G standards.
Well, and the inference is that if Huawei or ZTE or whoever have been involved in the 5G standardisation process, that somehow the whole standard is tainted in their view. How are they going to work around that?
Which is crazy when it's the biggest, it's the biggest equipment supplier in the world now.
Yeah. And how are they working around it? What are they going to do? Ban 5G from America?
Yeah.
Because there's a bit too much bloody Huawei going on in
That's
it.
right. Standards don't mean a thing, though. Don't forget, America is the greatest place in the world. So, don't forget that.
Yeah, make America great again. But we're not going to get into all the Trumpiness. So I think that's interesting. I think Huawei's obviously not happy. Presumably the Chinese state's not happy. but they're keeping their cards close to their chest. They haven't sort of freaked out or anything.
I mean, what I quite like is that you're gonna. I mean, obviously this is protectionism. Well, not. It's not protectionism.
/ paranoia,
but it's paranoia with a bit of protectionism because.
Well, that was Trump's ticket, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Trump administration wants to bring jobs home to America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you've got those reports the other day of Google opening an office in
China.
Xinjiang, thinking that they can. Well, I mean, I think it's just it's another way for them to try and reassert themselves in the Chinese market. So,
but they're going to have to do it the Chinese way, aren't they? They're going to have to allow a lot of censorship and all that sort of thing.
What is their situation in China at the moment? Google, because they've obviously you can't use Google services, can you? In China,
so, yeah.
in the way that.
But as Jamie wrote about,
the Great
they're trying to,
whatever it's called.
They're trying to sort of find another way of sort of getting a bit more access to the market.
So I think
it's
they
a bit
got
of tit for tat, isn't it? It seems, going on.
They're opening an office in Xinjiang. I mean, it's just if you're gonna make steps in the Chinese technology world, Xinjiang is the perfect place to start. It's where everyone has their headquarters or at least their sort of R&D.
Silicon Valley.
Colossal factories and stuff.
But I think last time I went there, aside from being on when I was in the Wi-Fi in the hotels, I really struggled to get any form of Google services whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know there is a ban, but I found it weird that I could. For instance, when I was in the hotel, and maybe it was because I think I was in a Hilton or something like that, I could access Facebook, I could access WhatsApp, I could, do those things when I was connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, which was really strange. I mean, this was 2 years ago. So
maybe it's, I don't know, but international business travellers come into that hotel and there's some kind of. I mean, I remember when we were in a conference in Wuzhen, actually, Huawei event.
That was variable, wasn't it?
Well, I could never use Google. I don't remember being able to access it at all.
I found my Facebook.
Bing, I think.
I found my Facebook variables. Sometimes I could, and other times the Great Firewall kicked in.
So I was out there for one of their annual shows. So whether whether it was relaxed slightly because you're going to have a load of international customers coming in
and journalists
and all that sort of thing. So I don't know, but I mean, I just think it's quite funny that you got Google, who's used to throwing its weight around everywhere, and then all of a sudden you got the US government pissing off the Chinese, and you got Google trying to creep its way back into
and Google's
China.
probably going, cheers, government.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Not helping.
It shows how dependent you are on these services as well, because it was sort of like panic stations. I can't use Google. It's like I felt lost.
I know, I was panicking because I couldn't show off all the cool places I was going to my mates on Facebook.
So this was part of the reason. This was part of what my angle was when I wrote it last night was, we're so dependent on Google everywhere. It gets to throw its weight around. It gets to make sure that it gets to bully people essentially. But it goes into China, and all of a sudden, the vacuum, the Google vacuum that it's had has allowed Baidu to sort of take charge. It's got its own sort of social media sites. I don't know what whatever the operating systems are out there for mobile phones.
It is mainly Android, but they'll probably put some restrictions on the Android.
But we're not dependent, like the Chinese aren't dependent on Google like we are.
No.
So Google's going to have to, it's not going to get its own way. It's going to really struggle against Baidu because everyone in China is reliant on Baidu like we are reliant on Google. So it's going to be, prying people away from that dependence is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, good luck with that, Google.
Yeah, good luck with that, especially when Trump's pissing off the Chinese.
Yeah, it's all interconnected, isn't it? Okay, last sort of geographical hop is onto Nordics, Sweden and Finland. I wrote a story which people seem to like. It was quite a short story, and I was making a bit of mischief because Nokia had got a deal win with Telia or Telia. Which is it, Pierre?
Second one.
It's Telia, is it? Okay, cheers. So Telia then. They got a win with them, and they're the Sweden-based telecoms group, but they've also got operations in Finland and in Norway and Denmark and the Baltics, I think.
There's a lot of stuff in Central Asia they're trying to flog,
Right. Oh yeah. There's
underperforming
India?
operations throughout. It's all.
It's Telenor.
Telenor,
Sorry.
Telenor's got India.
Yeah, there was all that Uzbekistan where everyone was just running, panicked from Uzbekistan because it was all properly dodgy.
Yeah.
And so they got a deal win. It was just for sort of core network stuff, which you reckon, Ian, the big money in sort of 5G type stuff or in general network update stuff is more in the radio side rather than the core.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that doesn't mean it's insignificant.
Yeah, and they sent out a press release, and they're obviously quite pleased with it. And I just had a bit of fun because I thought, hold on a sec, they're a Finnish company, and they've just scored a big deal with a Swedish operator. That's got to piss Ericsson off, hasn't it? So I sort of ran with it without any inside knowledge, I hasten to add. It was just speculation that maybe they were especially jubilant because of those sort of geographical facts. And yeah, I just think that's interesting. We're at a time where these deal wins, everyone's struggling. I think there was further little setback for Ericsson this week because they had to announce a write-down of about a couple of billion dollars.
Yeah.
Mainly,
is that another restructuring thing?
It was mainly a Goodwill write-down. So Goodwill write-downs are normally botched M&A. So when you buy a company, you book a $10 billion worth of goodwill against its value, and then when that company turns out to be 10 years later, you have to write all that goodwill down.
So the acquisitions they made that aren't worth very much now.
So there's no resale value, so they can't recoup their
Yeah,
investment.
they're booking the loss. They're just saying, that
there's
didn't
no
happen.
cash cost, but it does have an impact on operating profit.
Yeah, you have a one-off non-cash charge so that your numbers look pretty smelly.
Yeah.
When you take it on
Q4,
the chin.
which comes the end of this month, I think, isn't going to look too hot.
Exactly.
Quarterly season.
Quarterly season. Oh, we can't wait for that, can we, Jamie? We love a bit of quarterly earnings.
There is one I am actually looking forward to. Where I was discussing it with Ray before we came up here. Is IBM's.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, apparently, if you listen to the analysts, it is going to be the first in 23 quarters where they register year-on-year growth.
Really? They haven't grown in that many quarters?
It's been 22 consecutive quarters where they've gone down year-on-year.
Blimey.
And what's made them turn the corner? This is all off on a bit of a tangent.
Yeah,
it's all right. We can keep doing that until Pierre starts lobbing stuff at us.
So basically, they've got this their strategic imperatives units, which is like clouds, analytics, security.
AI. They're well into the AI stuff.
Yeah,
aren't they?
Watson is in. I think their analytics division.
Okay, right.
And it's basically over the last 7 or 8 quarters, the the imperatives are just the strategic imperatives have been taken up a bigger and bigger slice of total revenues, and obviously their legacy business is declining.
But unlike, for example, Ericsson, they've managed to grow new areas better to compensate for that decline.
I mean, you just look at their. I mean, Watson is up there with DeepMind as the best AI.
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really,
I thought
really.
Google was kind of considered to be quite a long way ahead of.
I mean,
now,
Google DeepMind is one of the best. Is arguably the best. But then Watson is.
This is the one that plays Go, isn't it? DeepMind.
DeepMind does.
It plays that Chinese board game, but it can't make a cup of tea.
But IBM were the ones that beat what's his name at
Kasparov back in the day.
Chess.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So Google's gone chess.
Chess is easy.
Anyone can play.
What about Go?
Anyone can beat a master chess player. That's fine.
I'll be impressed when one of them starts winning at Twister.
But it's not just IBM. But it's not just AI as well. It's what is it? Their IaaS business is, it's pretty substantial.
Their IaaS business.
IaaS. It's up there with the Googles.
There's good money in the IaaS business up there.
A lot, yeah. But yeah, so I think I'm looking forward to see.
Okay, yeah, cool.
0.87% growth apparently.
Better than a kick in the teeth.
Okay. We'll have to measure what they actually.
Yeah.
We got one more little tangent, and I think then we'll wrap it up. We were chatting just before, Ian, talking about this sort of European competition among the big kit vendors.
Yeah.
And you got a nice, I don't know if it's a scoop or you were just sort of early to the story or whatever, but it's a story, it's about a month ago now, about DT. So to go full circle, back to DT as well. The old Venn diagrams are overlapping nicely here. So DT, Ericsson got a big radio win with DT, is that right? I'll let you talk.
Yeah, it landed a radio access network deal with DT, which, and I think the gear they're providing is sort of upgradable to 5G.
Right.
So
definitely, there will be 5G all over the press release.
It did, yeah. It came up a lot. I mean, RAN's it's kind of the baseband stuff, so it's the stuff that goes around the bottom part of the radio towers, as far as I understand it, as opposed to the antennas that someone technical will probably write in and say that's completely wrong. But
well, they'd have to listen to the podcast first.
But DT has DT has 2 big RAN vendors in Germany, basically.
Right.
That it's used, and in the past those have been Huawei and Nokia. So one of these companies has been dislodged by Ericsson.
Yeah.
The question is which one? Which I haven't been able to.
What are you doing sat here? Get on the phone, son.
But we know one of them has.
Right,
and it's quite a big loss.
But whoever it is, that's a big coup.
It's a big
for
coup
Ericsson.
for Ericsson, yeah. And it's important for Ericsson because it's trying to, it sees 5G. I mean, we're talking about all the problems it's got with the write downs. They're at the media business that it's trying to flog, basically.
Yeah.
And
the cloud. It was media and cloud with a big write down.
It's really trying to focus everything now back on the sort of radio side and the sort of its mobile expertise and carve out a position in 5G and be the kind of leader in that area. So anything that it gets that's to do with 5G, it's a massive result. It's going to blow its trumpet about it,
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think on that note, we've covered a nice lot of stuff there. So thanks a lot, guys, and thanks a lot to you for listening. Make sure you join us for the next one.